There is a story happening in a house on your street. You see the family at church, at the grocery store, at school pickup. You see a portrait of a normal life. But often, the most dangerous stories are the ones we can't see. The ones that unfold in the quiet spaces, just below the surface. This is Peace Interrupted. Season 1, Sarah's story is brought to you by The Journey and the Process.
Hey friends, the story you're about to hear involves relational violence, physical, spiritual abuse. So please listen with care. And if you're a victim of domestic violence, could I encourage you to call the National Domestic Violence Hotline at 1-800-799-SAFE. The story that we're delivering today is a composite narrative. Any resemblance to any real person here or perhaps passed away is entirely coincidental. We want you to recognize the needs that are available and out there, the helpers that want to step into a story with you, but we also wanted to make sure that we were preserving and honoring everyone's story, not just one person's story. We really appreciate you being a part of this podcast and participating with us. And while this is real to life, we hope that it inspires you to take the next step to receive help or perhaps extend help.
Sarah is 32. If you saw her at the end of the day, standing by the pickup curb outside King's Christian Academy, you'd see a portrait of a dedicated mother. Her 3 children, 2 boys and a girl, orbit around her, one tugging on her hand, another showing her a drawing, the youngest spinning in a circle. She moves with a practiced, almost weary efficiency. She's an infant caregiver at the school's Child Development Center, a position she took on when her youngest child started preschool. It's a role that suits her. The other parents and teachers, if asked, would describe her as quiet, maybe a little reserved, but unfailingly kind. She is a gentle soul, not only with the babies she cares for, but people in general. Her smile is soft, almost apologetic, as if she's sorry for taking up space. But this version of Sarah, the quiet and reserved version, is an adaptation, a protective shell grown over a decade of careful conditioning. Before she was a wife and mother, before the weight of a hidden world settled on her shoulders, she was someone else entirely. We spoke to someone who knew her then, a former teacher from her high school, Mrs. Gable.
Sarah? Sarah was a firecracker. She was the lead in our production of Our Town. She was the captain of the debate team her junior year. She had this laugh. You could recognize it immediately, even from the hall. There was no nonsense about her. If she thought something was unfair, she'd be the first one to say so. But she'd do it with such intelligence and charm, you couldn't help but listen. She wasn't just book smart, she was wise. I wrote in her yearbook that she was destined to lead. I believed it. I still do. Seeing what she became, or maybe endured, it's a dissonance my mind still struggles to resolve. She was bright, incandescently so.
That incandescent girl is who 18-year-old Mark first saw when she was just a freshman. He was a senior, already a man in the eyes of the other students. He was handsome, drove his own car, and was a leader in their church youth group. He zeroed in on Sarah with a focus that was both flattering and absolute. To their small, faith-based community, it was a storybook romance. A responsible older boy is taking a promising young woman under his wing. Their path was set from the beginning. He went to a Christian college 4 hours away. She finished high school, turning down scholarship opportunities to stay closer to him, a decision that seemed romantic at the time. They were married the summer after he graduated. It was a beautiful wedding, filled with friends and family who saw nothing but a perfect, blessed union. And for a while it was. But control, like a vine, doesn't strangle a tree overnight. It grows slowly, wrapping itself so gently that the tree barely notices. To understand how that vine first took hold, you have to talk to someone who watched it happen up close. We spoke with her older sister, Chloe.
Oh, Sarah. She was the bright one, just like everyone says. When she started dating Mark, we were all a little starstruck by him. He was so mature, so decisive. My parents thought he was the answer to their prayers. He was going to take care of her. And his attention on her was total. I remember one time, a bunch of us girls were going to the movies. Mark showed up at the theater, said he'd just been driving by and saw our car. He paid for his ticket and sat right next to her, his arm around her the whole time. My friends thought it was the most romantic thing ever. I remember feeling a little crowded. Like, can we just have a girls' night? But I felt guilty for thinking it. After they got married and moved, she just faded. When they'd come home for a visit, she was quieter. Mark did most of the talking. Looking back, I can see that he'd talk for her. Sarah's found that being a mom is a full-time ministry, he'd say. She's decided to step back from her old hobbies to really focus on being a wife. He'd say it with this big, proud smile, and she would just nod. I would try to get her alone, just for coffee or something, but he would often have a reason why it wasn't a good time, or come up with an alternative plan. I remember her 30th birthday. I called to plan a surprise weekend for her. He answered, of course. He was so gracious. Chloe, that is so thoughtful. But Sarah's been so stressed lately, I think a big celebration would just overwhelm her. I was thinking about a quiet, special dinner at home, maybe just family. He made me feel like I was being insensitive to my own sister's needs. He twisted my gesture of love into something that would be a burden for her. I hung up the phone and burst into tears. I was somehow feeling welcome and shut out at the same time. He was building a wall around her, and the bricks he used were love, faith, and concern.
What Chloe felt so acutely, that sense of being shut out, is the lived experience of isolation, the foundational tactic of coercive control. It's an insidious process. It wasn't a single command or a dramatic ultimatum. It was a series of 1,000 small diversions, 1,000 reasonable explanations, an unanswered phone call here, a canceled plan there. Each act, on its own, seems plausible, even loving. But together they form a suffocating enclosure, severing the victim from outside perspectives, from support, and crucially from anyone who holds a memory of the person they used to be. Mark didn't need to lock Sarah in a room. He simply built a new room around her and convinced her it was a sanctuary. By controlling her social interactions, he became the sole interpreter of her reality. He defined her needs, her stresses, and her desires for her. And once someone is alone, once their sense of normal has been completely recalibrated to the abuser's liking, they become vulnerable to the next layer of control. The vine has taken hold. Now, it can begin to squeeze. Isolation is the soil in which other forms of abuse take root. Once a person is cut off from outside voices, their reality can be methodically reshaped. For Sarah, the quiet solitude of her life meant that Mark's voice became the only one that mattered. His definitions became her truths. With the walls of isolation built, the nature of his control began to change, creeping from her social life into her wallet. We found evidence of this in the one place Sarah should have had some small measure of independence, her job. We spoke to her coworker, Maria.
Sarah is so sweet, super good with the babies, very patient. But she always keeps to herself. I remember last Christmas, we were all putting in $10 to get a nice gift card for our director. Everyone was doing it. I went up to Sarah, and she just got this panicked look in her eye. She was clutching her purse and said something like, "Oh, I'm so sorry. I didn't bring any cash today." I told her no worries. She could just give it to me tomorrow. She never did. She avoided me for a week. It was just $10. It wasn't about the money, it was just odd. It felt like she couldn't, not that she didn't want to.
That feeling Maria had that Sarah couldn't was correct. What Maria witnessed was a textbook example of financial control. Though Sarah was earning a paycheck, she had no access to it. This constant pressure, combined with her deep isolation, created a powder keg. All it needed was a spark. That spark would come not from a coworker, but from the one person still trying desperately to get past the wall Mark had built, her sister, Chloe. With Chloe's birthday approaching, Sarah decided to commit an act of rebellion. For weeks, she had been secretly accumulating a small stash of cash, totaling $27. She used it to buy a delicate silver locket at the local antique store. It was a secret she couldn't keep. That evening, she showed the locket to Mark. According to the story Sarah would later recount to her sister, the conversation escalated with terrifying speed. Mark's initial questioning about where she got the money morphed into accusations of being childish and irresponsible. He accused her of disrespecting the system he had put in place to protect their family. When Sarah tried to defend herself, he grew cold. He told her she was selfish, overly emotional, and that she was the one out of control. Then came the shift from emotional to physical control. He confiscated her phone and car keys. He then ordered her into their bedroom for a timeout. When she hesitated, he physically forced her inside, slammed the door, and held it shut momentarily from the outside, all the while scolding her to sit on the bed. She was a prisoner in her own home. Hours later, he returned, opening the door without a word, and went to sleep in the guest room. Shaking, her mind reeling, Sarah grabbed her phone and made the one call she knew she could.
It was after midnight when she called. I knew something was wrong the second I answered. She was just whispering, hysterical, but trying not to make a sound. I could barely understand her at first. She just kept saying, "Chloe, I feel so trapped." I tried to calm her down. She said she'd bought me a birthday present, a locket. She started sobbing about the locket. He found it, and they fought. And he told her she was crazy, that she was selfish, and then he took her keys and her phone, and he forced her to stay in the bedroom. She said when she finally got out, she found the locket on the floor in the hallway. It was crushed, like he had ground it into the floor with his heel. That's what broke her. It wasn't just being locked in the room. It was him destroying this one little thing that was supposed to be a connection between us. It was so deliberate, so cruel. I told her to get the kids, to get in her car and just drive to me, but she couldn't. She was terrified he would wake up. She just kept whispering, "What do I do? What am I supposed to do?"
This is the moment the pattern becomes undeniable. This is the escalation. The abuser, when faced with a small act of independence, dramatically increases the level of control to reassert dominance. The crushed locket was symbolic. It was the destruction of hope. But the locked door was the turning point. It was an act so unambiguous, it shattered Sarah's ability to rationalize his behavior. This wasn't protection. This wasn't a timeout. This was a cage. In that moment, Sarah knew she couldn't stay. But as Chloe heard on the phone, she had no idea how to leave. Her next steps would lead her to two pillars of her community, seeking help. First, her pastor. Then, law enforcement. She was about to discover how the systems we trust often fail to see the pieces of the pattern, let alone the whole picture. The next morning was a study in practice normalcy. Sarah got the children ready, packed their lunches, and drove them to King's Christian Academy. She smiled at the other parents. But by mid-morning, the facade was cracking. The memory of the locked door and the image of the crushed silver locket played on a loop in her mind. The terror from the night before was a physical weight, making it hard to breathe. She felt an overwhelming need to talk to someone, for another human being to know that something was wrong. She looked across the room and saw her coworker, Maria.
I could tell something was off with her all morning. She was so quiet, and she looked like she hadn't slept in a week. Around 10, she came over to me, and I could see her eyes were red. I just put my hand on her arm and asked if she was okay, and she just crumbled. She didn't cry, but her voice broke. She said, "I just had a really bad fight with Mark. Things have been so hard, and I don't know what to do." My heart just broke for her. You know, we work in a place where we talk about faith and family all the time. So I just said the first thing that came to mind. I said, "Sarah, have you thought about talking to Pastor Dave? He's so wonderful with this kind of stuff. I bet if you called his office, he could make time for you today." I just wanted her to talk to someone who could give her real guidance.
Maria's suggestion was the spark. It was a lifeline that aligned with everything Sarah had ever been taught. When your marriage is in trouble, you seek spiritual counsel. The idea, coming from a trusted coworker, felt like permission. It felt like the right and proper next step. Sarah thanked Maria, asked her to watch her infant room for a little while, and walked through the adjoining hallway that connected the school to the church. She found an empty prayer room, closed the door, and made the call. Pastor Dave, the senior pastor at King's Community, recalls with us the conversation he had that morning, a conversation he now looks back on with a heavy heart.
Ugh, that day. I've replayed that conversation in my mind 1,000 times since I learned the truth. At the time, I just heard a parishioner in distress. Sarah was clearly upset, and she told me she and Mark had a terrible fight. What I didn't grasp, what I wasn't trained to listen for, was the fear underneath the sadness. She focused on the idea that they were distant. She told me he had slept in the guest room, and she was heartbroken, and I latched on to that. In my mind, the problem to be solved was a divided home. My focus back then was entirely on preserving the marriage unit. I saw a problem I'd seen a dozen times, and I reached for the tool I always used. I reached for scripture. I shared with her Paul's wisdom in Ephesians chapter 4. "In your anger, do not sin. Do not let the sun go down while you are still angry, and do not give the devil a foothold." I thought I was helping. I thought I was giving her a roadmap back to reconciliation. I told her that by allowing this physical separation, they were inviting spiritual trouble into their marriage. What I was really telling her, without realizing it, was that her desire for safety was a spiritual failure. I asked her to pray for Mark, to examine her own heart, and I gave her the number of a biblical counselor. I thought I had done my job. In reality, I had completely, utterly failed her.
Pastor Dave now understands what he didn't then. Sarah, out of fear and prompted by a well-meaning friend, presented him with a symptom: distance. And he, in turn, prescribed a solution for that symptom, never thinking to ask about the underlying disease. His misuse of Ephesians 4 is a textbook example of how spiritual guidance can go wrong. It invalidated Sarah's legitimate feelings of fear and placed the onus for reconciliation squarely on her shoulders. Sarah left feeling profoundly ashamed and more alone than ever. The institution she trusted most had not only failed to see her pain, it had inadvertently blamed her for it. The shame was suffocating, but beneath it, the fear remained. The memory of the bedroom door was a cold, hard fact that no amount of prayer could change. She knew the pastor didn't understand the danger. She would have to turn somewhere else. After the disastrous call with Pastor Dave, Sarah felt a profound sense of shame. But woven into the pastor's misguided advice was a single thread of actionable hope: marriage counseling. For Sarah, this felt like a concrete step, a project, a chance to fix what was broken. To her surprise, after a week of strained silence, Mark agreed to go. For a few months, a fragile, tentative hope began to bloom.
There was a period there, maybe 3 or 4 months, where she sounded better, lighter. She told me they were going to counseling every Tuesday. She was optimistic. She'd say things like, "The counselor is giving us communication tools to use, and I have homework. I'm learning about my triggers and how I contribute to the conflict." I remember thinking, "You contribute?" But I didn't say it. She was so hopeful, and I didn't want to ruin it. But then, the calls started to change. She'd mentioned that Mark had missed a session for a work thing. Then he missed another. Finally, she admitted he had quit going altogether. He told her that he had done his part, and that the rest of the problem was her emotional issues. He said he wasn't the one who needed fixing. She was devastated.
Mark's behavior is a classic abuser tactic known by the acronym DARVO: deny, attack, and reverse victim and offender. He denied his role in the conflict, attacked Sarah's emotional state as the real problem, and reversed the roles, positioning himself as the stable victim of her instability. With the accountability of counseling removed, the abuse escalated. This time, there was only rage. A breaking point came on a Saturday afternoon. Sarah was on the phone with Chloe, making plans for a weekend visit with the kids. Mark overheard the conversation. On the other end of the line, Chloe heard his voice rise sharply in the background, angry and accusatory. "Who are you making plans with?" he demanded. Chloe heard Sarah start to reply, "It's just Chloe." And then the line went dead. Chloe immediately tried to call back. The phone rang and rang before going to voicemail. She sent a text, "Is everything okay? Call me." No reply. She called again 5 minutes later. Straight to voicemail. Another 10 minutes passed. She called again, straight to voicemail, as if the phone had been turned off. After a half hour of frantic, unanswered calls, a cold dread set in. Terrified, and hundreds of miles away, Chloe looked up the number for Sarah's local police department and requested a welfare check. When the 2 officers arrived, summoned by an out-of-state third party, they were met at the door by a man, Mark, who was calm, articulate, and reasonable, and a woman, Sarah, who was crying, emotional, and struggling to form a coherent sentence.
"We got the call for a welfare check. An out-of-state family member said she was on the phone with her sister, heard a verbal argument, and the phone disconnected. Said she hadn't been able to get her back on the line for about a half hour. When we arrived, the husband met us at the door, invited us in. He said his wife had gotten hysterical over a disagreement, and he had hung up the phone to de-escalate. The female party was crying, but confirmed her husband's story. They admitted to arguing, but that Chloe overreacted. He did claim that she was screaming and hitting his chest. She added that he shoved her down after he grabbed her phone. It looked like they were both involved, but nothing too serious. It appeared mutually combative. When you can't determine a predominant aggressor, you can't really make an arrest. We let them cool off and gave them a stern warning that if we had to come back, we'd likely be taking both of them to jail."
Let's analyze this response. The officer uses the term mutually combative, which effectively finds both parties equally at fault. What was not applied here is a predominant aggressor analysis. This is a critical tool that requires law enforcement to look beyond the immediate incident and ask questions about the history of abuse, the power dynamics in the relationship, and the level of fear. Instead of seeing a victim and her abuser, the officer saw 2 equal combatants. The result was catastrophic for Sarah. The system she turned to for protection not only failed to identify her as a victim, but it threatened to punish her for it. The message Mark received was clear. He could escalate his abuse to physical violence with no consequences. The message Sarah received was even clearer. No one would help her.
She called me about an hour after the police left. Her voice was just gone. It was flat, empty. She said, "The police were here, Chloe. You called them?" I explained I was terrified, and she kind of understood, but she was just numb. She told me what they said, that if they had to come back, they'd arrest her too. She said, "The counseling didn't work. The pastor thinks I'm the problem, and now the police think I'm the problem too." And then she said something I will never forget. She said, "Maybe they're right."
This is the ultimate goal of coercive control, to so thoroughly warp a victim's reality that they come to believe they are worthless, culpable, and deserving of the abuse. Sarah had followed all the rules. She had sought help from her church and from the law. And both systems, through a lack of training and a failure to see the full pattern, had not only failed her, they had actively pushed her back into the hands of her abuser, leaving her more hopeless and in more danger than ever before. The final breaking point came when Mark discovered Sarah had a small go bag hidden in her closet. He confronted her after the kids were in bed. The violence was cold and methodical. He restrained her and beat her, delivering punches to her stomach and ribs. He whispered that if she ever thought about leaving again, he would finish the job. The next morning, he didn't say a word, but just glared at her as she got dressed for work. Sarah went to work, moving like a fragile doll. Her coworker, Maria, noticed her obvious pain and, after finding her crying silently in a supply closet, knew something was terribly wrong. She called Pastor Dave.
Maria was frantic on the phone. She was whispering about Sarah being hurt. When she said that, every bit of bad advice I ever gave Sarah came crashing down on me. I saw a woman I had sent back into the lion's den. I told Maria to stay with her. I hung up the phone and I immediately called 911. I told the dispatcher I had reason to believe one of our staff members had been seriously assaulted by her husband and was at work, injured.
An ambulance was dispatched along with the police. Sarah was transported to the local hospital to be evaluated. Based on her testimony and the clear evidence of her injuries, Mark was arrested later that day. The advocate on call met Sarah in the emergency room.
I met Sarah in the ER. The doctors confirmed she had 2 cracked ribs and signs of recent non-fatal strangulation. Our local shelters were at capacity, so we moved to Plan B. Sarah gave consent for her coworker Maria to take the children home from school. The immediate priority was keeping them with a known friendly face until her sister could arrive. I made the call to her sister, Chloe.
Chloe and her husband immediately got in their car. Her parents followed in theirs. 4 hours later, in the late afternoon, the family convoy arrived. Their first stop was Maria's house to collect the children. Then, they all went to the hospital. They found Sarah in a small room, sitting on the edge of the bed, her face a pale mask of exhaustion and pain.
Walking into that hospital room, it was surreal. My mom just rushed to her and held her. My dad, who always bragged about Mark, just stood in the doorway, completely broken by the sight of her. My husband took the kids out to eat. There wasn't a lot of talking. It was just a decision. We all knew. She wasn't staying another night in that town. We told the advocate our plan. That evening, my dad helped get her discharged from the hospital. We decided to take 2 cars for the drive home. My mom and dad took the kids, got them settled in with blankets and pillows, trying to make it feel like an adventure. My husband drove our car, and I sat in the back seat with Sarah. For the first hour, she just leaned her head against the window and slept. Then, in the dark, on the highway, she started talking, really talking. She told me this wasn't the first time he had hurt her like that. Not even close. She told me about other beatings, other times he had hurt her where no one could see. And then she whispered about the things he made her do in their bedroom after he had hurt her, or after he had been drinking. The strangulation, the sexual assault, things that you can't even imagine. And I realized that this final, brutal beating wasn't the whole story. It was just the epilogue to a book I never even knew she was living. My parents, in the car ahead of us, still don't know the worst of it. They just know he hurt her. But I know. I saw maybe 1% of the truth. She survived a war that no one else even knew was happening.
Sarah's story is one of immense loss, but it is not a tragedy. It is the story of a family that, after years of failing to see, finally rallied to perform a rescue. It required a coworker to trust her gut, a pastor to admit his failure, and a police force to act on clear evidence. Most of all, it required a survivor to endure an unspeakable reality long enough for help to finally arrive. Sarah and her children are safe for now, on the road, leaving their old life behind. Their journey is just beginning, and it will be complicated by legal battles and immense trauma. But it is a journey that began with a whispered confession in the dark, on the road to freedom, surrounded by a family that was finally beginning to understand. Her story serves as a stark reminder to all of us that what we see on the surface of domestic abuse is often just a fraction of the truth, and that our response, as professionals and as human beings, can be the difference between life and death.